right, cool. Cool.
Okay, testing, this is working. Brilliant. Okay, so guys, welcome back. We are now continuing our program with some tech leadership stuff. So our next speaker is Cassandra Faris. She had a brilliant adventure coming up here, so don't forget to ask that also after her presentation. Cassandra Faris is passionate about the human side of technology. So she is a community coordinator for the Microsoft MVP Award program, and she began her career as a recruiter. So you could get some pointers there. She is an international speaker who specializes in teaching people how to communicate, be more effective team members, and advance their careers. When she's not busy with the tech community, she is an avid tabletop gamer, corgi mom, and a soccer fan who travels as much as possible. So Cassandra, let's hear health, the most important tech tool.
All right, thank you for the intro. Captions on, all right. So I know a handful of you in here, I don't know many, but I know that there are at least a couple people in here who can attest to the fact that I am not a morning person. I don't like mornings. I don't like getting up early. I'm very much a night owl. And I'm also not a winter person. I live in Ohio, in the United States, where it's very cold and very snowy about 5 months out of the year. And so a few years back, I woke up on a December morning, and I remember I didn't feel well. I had a sore throat, I had a headache, I was coughing, I was sneezing, just generally feeling like crap. And I kind of just chalked it up to the fact that I'd been traveling that weekend, and so I went into work anyway, even though I maybe shouldn't have gone into work. Next morning I wake up, and I'm still feeling all of those same symptoms, and I've developed a fever. But it was really busy. It's the end of the year. We're trying to wrap up. So I caught off sick and felt at the time very guilty about doing this. And then I wasn't even able to have my sick day. My sick day wound up being me laying on the couch, answering emails, answering Slack messages, trying to conduct interviews, and just generally trying to do my work even though I needed to be resting. And that cycle kind of continued for an entirety of a month where I would try to take a day off, try to get some rest and some sleep, but I also had to work and I kept myself very busy and I wasn't taking proper care of myself. And that all led into me going into the month of January. I was scheduled to teach a workshop on interviewing at a conference called CodeMash. And the week before the conference, I had no voice. I was running a fever consistently. I just generally felt horrible. And so a week before the conference, I go to the doctor and my cold had become bronchitis, had become pneumonia. So I go into this conference and I'm on this heavy dose of steroids and antibiotics just prior to it. And so I figure, this isn't cool. This isn't cool that I made myself take a little cold and become something so bad that I had to be on these pretty serious medications. So I decided, okay, well, after CodeMash, it's January, New Year's resolution time. I'm going to take better care of myself, and I'm also going to start conversations to have other people taking care of themselves. So then what happens with New Year's resolutions? As usual, they're easier said than done. So fast forward a couple weeks after CodeMash, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I'm chugging coffee because I'd had, a late night. It was this cold gray day, and my phone is blowing up, my computer is blowing up, I'm getting Slack notifications, I'm getting people stopping by my desk, I have a hiring manager on my back trying to get this project staffed, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And in a moment of desperation, I sent a text to a friend, and they said that their day was crazy and disorganized, and I said, I'm gonna quit my job. I'm just gonna go be a hermit because people are exhausting me. And they made some joke back, and I said, yeah, but then nobody would need emotional support, nobody would need anything from me. Now, I'm an extrovert. I draw energy from being around people. I draw energy from talking to people. And there's nothing I find more rewarding than being out in the community and helping people be better at them, be better programmers, be better humans as well. And so when I reached a point where I didn't want to be around people, I knew that something was wrong. And that was the moment when I started to really stop and think, well, what got me to this point? Well, very sedentary lifestyle, right? Like, I go back and forth with being good about exercise and not, and I was definitely in a state where I just automatically took exercise out of my schedule because I thought I was too busy. My schedule was super packed between work, I was running a conference, I was writing talks, and I had all of these other things going on. And everything was on fire. I had a big project I was staffing that was kind of on the line for if I couldn't staff the team, I wasn't going to be able to get the project. And of course, being a technology recruiter, going to a lot of user groups and stuff, pizza was a staple of my diet. So does this sound familiar? Right? This is what it looks like in our industry. This is what we kind of view as normal, and this should not be our normal. We shouldn't be sacrificing our health, our happiness, and our relationships for the sake of money and success in our careers. Now, there's nothing wrong with being passionate about our work. I know just by being at a conference, you're passionate about what you do. But I'm a firm believer that we can be passionate about our work while also balancing things. And I believe that if we as technical professionals don't talk about and focus on our health, we're never going to be able to resolve them, and we're actually more likely to lend ourselves to burnout. Now, quick pause, I am not a doctor, I am not a lawyer. Everything I'm talking about is my own personal experiences, my research and everything, so definitely there's no one right answer in all of this stuff, but just giving you kind of my context. So, what happens and why is it important to take care of ourselves? Well, when we don't take care of ourselves physically, we gain weight, our immunity gets lower. As I'm not sleeping, if I'm not taking care of myself, I'm more likely to get a cold. Aches and pains can be worse. Maybe it's more headaches, maybe it's whatever. Right now I have a broken foot, and I found when I'm tired, the foot actually hurts worse than when I'm not tired. You wind up missing work, which is ironic because you're trying to be a good and productive employee. And when we don't take care of our mental health, we feel hopeless, we feel stressed, we start to shut down, we turn to destructive acts. And this became very apparent during kind of the lockdown phase of pandemic, where I was having all of these feelings all of the time because I was just not paying as much attention to my mental health as I should have. We also wind up letting our family and our friends and our teams at work down if we don't take care of ourselves. Aside from that, by not taking care of ourselves physically, we actually open ourselves up to a lot of risks. 70% of deaths are due to chronic diseases. Chronic diseases are things like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And they're often kind of exacerbated by lifestyle choices. In the US, 86% of national healthcare costs are due to chronic disease, and healthcare in the US is expensive, and a whole other topic for another time, but this is a big piece of it. And the thing about chronic diseases is that they're some of the most preventable. Like you can be predisposed maybe to have heart disease or diabetes or something, but if you make some of the right lifestyle choices, those don't necessarily develop. Now, what does this have to do with work? Well, when you neglect your health, when you're not feeling well, that month that I was trying to work when I felt so sick, I wasn't getting as much stuff done. My productivity was actually lower because I was trying to work through being sick instead of taking 2 days to pause and sleep and rest and recover. And that, of course, lowers morale. I was probably not the most pleasant person to be around at the time because I was just trying to power through everything. And when you're not very productive and your morale is low and you're not always a great person to work with, that actually enhances or reduces your career growth and can harm you. So how do you improve your physical health? Focus on 3 areas: diet, exercise, and sleep. And consistently making an effort to eat better food, move around a little bit more, and get a little bit better sleep habits, you actually wind up being a healthier and happier person. And I'm not saying you have to go, gluten-free vegan marathon runner. This is all just little steps that work for everybody on their own. So when it comes to food, I love this quote: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. So marketers especially are guilty of trying to attribute morality to food. You'll hear about this sinful chocolate cake or a guilt-free ice cream or any number of things. And we try to assign morality to food, but food is not good or evil. Food is something to be enjoyed. It's something to be enjoyed and experienced with friends. The problem is that when you eat too many of the wrong things. Now, at the time I wrote this talk, I worked in an office where we hosted a lot of user groups and meetups, and we had all of the food and all of the snacks and all of the pizza and the beer fridge and the ping pong table and all that good stuff. And so if I wasn't careful, I would have a day where my diet would look like pizza and a Coke Zero for the user group, and then I'd have happy hour that night and have boneless wings and vodka for dinner. Which, fine, every once in a while. But when that's becoming a consistent thing, that's when it becomes a problem. So what do you do? How do you improve your healthy eating at work? And this applies whether you work in an office, you work from home, or some hybrid model. A lot of people swear by things like food prep. I know people who do whole meal prep at the beginning of the week. For me, I don't do that, but I do things like if I come home with a bunch of produce, if I wash it and prep it and it's easier to grab, I'm more likely to grab that with like some hummus for a snack over grabbing, I don't know, potato chips or something. You have to balance your food, right? So if I'm going to eat a cheeseburger and french fries for one meal, I'm going to have a salad for the other meal or something. Just trying to keep a balance and trying to keep a mix of foods helps nourish our bodies and helps us keep ourselves feeling healthier. And then how many people work through lunch at their desk? Yeah, I'm guessing almost most of the people in the room, if not all, or at least has in the past. Don't do that. So when I worked in an office, we would play board games at lunch. A couple days a week, we would have a board game day, and we would actually get together and play board games at lunchtime instead of sitting at our desks. Now that I work from home at lunch, sometimes I'll play a game on my Switch, or I'll go walk my dogs, or I'll do something to get away from my desk. And I found that honestly, when I'm trying to eat and work through lunch, I don't actually get very much work done anyway. So it's better to take that 30 or 60 minutes and step away and enjoy your meals. And then there's exercise. I'm real good at running late. Really good. So I go to sleep a lot with these great plans I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. and go for a run. Not a morning person. Don't know why I thought that was a thing I had to do. But anyway, if I do actually start my day with some exercise, I hate myself for those first few minutes. It's too early, I'm tired, I don't want to be awake, but I get going, I get the music on, the endorphins get flowing, and by the time I'm done, I'm actually energized and ready to get ready for the day. Even getting ready for a conference talk, I make sure I give myself time to not necessarily exercise, but I'll play music and like dance around my hotel room and stuff to get my energy level up, right? If I don't do that, I just feel rushed. I'm in a hurry, I'm stressed out, I'm cursing every traffic light that I have to stop at, and it's just doesn't work out as well for me. So it's hard to remember that though, when that alarm goes off at 6 a.m. So even if I don't get in a workout, or even if I'm in a time in my life where working out isn't necessarily something I'm able to do for whatever reason, I try to do some little things. Taking the stairs, parking farther away, standing up, stretching, walking to run an errand instead of driving to run an errand. America is a very car-friendly environment and people don't walk. But sometimes I'll choose to walk to lunch or walk to an errand and something. And the other thing I do is I treat my exercises like any other meeting. I signed up recently to take like aerial silk acrobatics classes. I put those classes on my calendar and I treat those as importantly as I would a meeting with my boss. And all of those little steps, those little things over time impact you and help you feel better. And then there's sleep. Want to be a morning person? There's an app for that. It's called The Alarm, and it's the worst. Now, we live in an industry that worships this kind of hustle culture. We read these articles about startup founders who sleep 3 hours a night, and we kind of worship the ground these people walk on. It's the first thing we sacrifice when we feel busy. It's the first thing we sacrifice when we feel pressured. And we figure, oh yeah, I'll just drink a couple extra coffees and I'll be good to go. The problem is that aside from beds being comfortable, and I like to sleep, we actually need sleep. Our bodies and our minds need sleep. So there's actually been studies done on this. When we sleep, it actually improves the way our brains work. It improves our brain function because when we're asleep, our brains can process all of the things we experience through the day. That's one reason that sometimes you'll go to sleep with a problem on your mind and wake up having figured it out. While we're asleep, our body physically heals itself. We regenerate tissues. When I first was recovering from my broken foot, my doctor told me to make sure I was trying to get some extra sleep so my body could heal and rest. It helps balance hormones, specifically the hormones that regulate metabolism are affected by your sleep. And finally, we're actually safer when we sleep. People who are driving when they're sleep deprived are more dangerous of drivers. The other thing is that sleep deprivation actually increases the risk of a lot of those chronic preventable diseases, such as heart disease and obesity, and it can exacerbate things like depression as well. So how do we get better sleep? The conventional wisdom is to keep a schedule, wake up and go to sleep at the same time every day. If you have a lifestyle that works for you, great. I'd love to know your trick, because I do not. But what I do instead is I have figured out exactly how much sleep I need a night to be functional. And I know I can go a day or two without it because I do that at conferences and stuff. But in general, I try to prioritize how much sleep I need a night and make sure I give myself time to do that. One way I manage that is sleep hygiene. And I was getting very bad about this last week. Normally, I shut off my screens an hour before I need to go to sleep. No TV, no phone, no video games, no nothing, because the light that's emitted from our screens signals to our brains it's time to be awake. And last week I was having a really hard time sleeping all week, and I was like, what's going on? And I realized I was on my phone tweeting and doing social media until right before bed. Not a good idea. Don't recommend it. It doesn't give your brain time to settle down. And finally, avoid alcohol and caffeine and stuff, especially later in the day, because then that will help you sleep better. The other thing is kind of know what helps you get to sleep. So for me, like I mentioned, I'm extroverted. I get very hyper. I get very wound up. Last night I was at, the pre-party and then went out to get some snacks with my friends. And I knew that no matter how late I was out, I needed to go home to my room and be alone for an hour to get tired, because I just get so much energy from people. And so I need to have an hour to myself to read, to unwind, whatever it is that I need to do to chill out so I can actually get some rest. So when we do this, what happens? I'm more productive. If I take these little steps, and I'm doing them most of the time, I'm more productive, I get more things done, and I feel better about them. I also have more fresh ideas. My morale is better. I'm a more pleasant person to be around. I'm a more pleasant and helpful coworker. I know for a fact I get cranky if I have too little sleep for too long. And when you're productive and you're pleasant to work with, you grow professionally. And I've seen that in my life as I've moved from recruiting to community management, which had been a goal of mine. During that transition, I actually started prioritizing my physical health a lot more, and I swear it helped me get to where I'm doing things professionally now. But physical health isn't enough. There's an additional aspect of our health that we often overlook or we talk about in hush-hush tones, and that's our mental health. But the thing is that physical and mental health affect each other, and you can't separate one from the other. So, physical health issues can increase the risk of mental or relationship problems. For example, I have ADHD, depression, and anxiety. When I am physically ill, when I have maybe a migraine, when I first broke my foot, when I'm sick, I mentally feel worse and my depression gets worse. And that might make me lash out at my partner or close up and isolate myself. Like I said, exacerbate things like depression and anxiety. When we're not taking care of ourselves mentally, it actually increases the risk of our physical things as well. So when I'm having a bad depression day, it might make a headache or something else worse. It might make me have problems in my relationship or with my friends again. And they affect our human interactions and our behavior. Now, nearly 1 in 5 adults has a mental illness. More recent studies are showing this is actually closer to about 25%, during and post-pandemic. And so it's very common, which means if you're on a team of 5 people, there's a chance somebody on your team has depression, anxiety, bipolar, any number of different diseases or disorders or neurodiversities. And from my firsthand experience, that does seem to track. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as it relates to tech in a minute. But first of all, what is a mental illness? It is something that affects how you think, how you behave, and how you feel. We can have the same diagnosis and have different experiences. A friend of mine and I do a talk on the links between accessibility, inclusivity, and mental health. And in this talk, we both talk about our experiences with generalized anxiety disorder. Same diagnosis, but his is around a lot of actually health-related issues, and mine is a lot around losses. So we have the same diagnosis, but we experience it differently. It can be caused by a lot of different things: genetics, biochemistry, life events, environment. For me, what happened is that genetically I have several people in my family with various mental illnesses, and I didn't really have any of them manifest for a long time. And then I went through some pretty traumatic experiences, some pretty major losses in my life, and it exacerbated my depression to a point where I needed to get help, and I wasn't able to just take care of myself on my own. But recovery is possible. Recovery is not linear, but it is possible to recover if you go through the right steps. Aside from that, what else is wrong when we neglect our mental health? You probably know what's coming at this point. We're not as productive. If I'm having a really bad depressive episode, it's hard enough for me to get out of bed, much less log into my computer and do my work. My morale is lower. It's harder to work with me. It's harder to be around me. And as a result, it lowers professional growth. And I've seen this over and over and over with people that I've known over the years. So if you think you might have a mental illness, actually treating it starts with recognizing it. And it starts with getting the proper diagnosis, whether it's you or whether it's a loved one. So here are some illnesses and signs of mental illness. First of all, excessive worry. Constantly be afraid of things that may or may not be rational. Frequent mood swings. You're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. Trouble doing your work, trouble focusing, trouble communicating at work. Avoiding social situations. And like I said at the beginning of this talk, this was me at one point when I didn't want to be around people, when I was trying to close myself off. I knew that something was wrong with me, something real, and I couldn't just, do yoga and walk my dogs enough to get out of it. Changes in your biological habits. It could be sleep, it could be eating, it could be any number of other things. And substance abuse is a sign of mental illness as well. Now, the tricky thing about all of this is these are also all parts of day-to-day life, right? Like, we all have days that we can't focus. We all have days where we can't quite communicate. I had a concussion about a year ago, and I still have some cognitive issues from that. But when it becomes consistent, and when it starts to affect our lives, that's when it might be something more than just the general ups and downs of daily life. So how do you treat a mental illness? How do you get a diagnosis? And the interesting thing is the same way I've been getting my broken foot the same way I've been recovering from my broken foot is the same process I went through to kind of recover from depression. I got a diagnosis. I went to the doctor, and the doctor says, your foot's broken. The doctor says, you have depression. Same thing. And then you arm yourself with knowledge. So I learn, what are my limitations? What can I do with a broken foot? Okay, what can I do to handle depression in the workplace when I'm having a hard time? Medication. Take ibuprofen for your foot. You take Wellbutrin to get your brain chemicals adjusted properly. So again, another parallel, but we don't talk about it that way nearly enough. Therapy, physical therapy to recover from something that's been broken. Mental therapy, I, to some extent, quite literally owe my therapist my life. I've been going to her for 4 years. She's amazing, and I don't see myself stopping anymore. I'm a big, big believer in therapy. Learn behaviors. And behaviors are something that I knew about before any of this other stuff because I got my ADHD diagnosis in my 20s. And I didn't realize how many behaviors I'd developed to handle ADHD, things like calendars and to-do lists and stuff like that. But you learn behaviors on how to help yourself with whatever else you're recovering from. And this would not be a Cassandra Faris talk if I didn't talk how important it is to have a community, to have a support system, to have people around you who care about you and who keep you accountable. And this all sounds great, but we still have a lot of stigma around mental illness. So much stigma. The reason this talk exists is because I do a talk on career growth questions. And in that talk, I have 2 slides where I mention evaluating your insurance benefits and stuff when taking a job offer. And I mention making sure that if you need mental health coverage, that it's part of your benefits. And every single time I give that talk, at least one person in the audience will raise their hand and say something about mental health, ask a question related to it, ask a question related to benefits. And several other people will take me aside in the hallway and want to talk about it and get very real and be like, well, I have depression at work. How do I deal with it? And it got to a point where so many people were taking me aside and asking me about this stuff that I decided I'm going to put a talk together on this and bring the conversation out. But the problem is it's invisible, right? So you could argue that a broken foot is a temporary disability, and it's very visible that I'm wearing this, gorgeous little orthopedic shoe on my foot. But the girl with the colorful hair and the colorful clothes with the pair of corgis doesn't seem like the girl who would have depression. And that's a big piece of it right there. And it's unknown. It's not rational. It's not logical. We're technologists. I know, for instance, if I have a migraine, that's a physical issue. I have a migraine, I take some medicine, I go to sleep, I feel better a few hours later. That's not how it works with mental illness. It takes weeks, months, possibly years to recover from that, and that can be very hard. Talking about feelings is hard. Talking about feelings is icky. Ironically, I used to hate talking about feelings, but by doing these talks over and over for enough years, I've now become a lot more open about it. But again, not rational, not logical, and can be icky and squishy to expose yourself like this and be this vulnerable, though I've found that the more vulnerable I am and the more I open myself up, actually, the better off I am and the better my life is. And you have people who've unfortunately dealt with bullying and similar problems, especially if you have anxiety is one that really can cause you to get some bullying because people make fun of you for worrying about things that they perceive as irrational when to your brain they're perfectly rational. So that's something that sometimes makes people not want to talk too. And it can especially be relatable. I was speaking at a conference last week in the Caribbean, and it was a lot of Latino men in the audience. And they were talking to me, and they were talking about how they can't even talk about this kind of stuff because their culture is so against men having any sorts of feelings that show vulnerability. So they knew full well that if they mentioned this, they could get made fun of. And so we talked about kind of how to deal with that more discreetly. But all of those things make it harder to discuss mental illnesses. And because of that stigma, now we're very afraid to discuss this. We're very afraid to talk about it, not realizing the disservice it does for us. So how do we start to overcome this? First of all, we need to have some understanding. So you don't know why your coworker maybe keeps missing the stand-up or is maybe always 2 minutes late to meetings or something like that. You don't necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes unless you ask. And a very real example of this is one of my consultants years ago. He was diagnosed with depression, and he came to me and was telling me about it. And he kept missing stand-ups, and people kept asking, why is he missing stand-ups? And it turned out because the perception was that he was just too lazy to wake up and come to a stand-up at 8:30 in the morning, when in reality he was literally having trouble getting out of bed and getting to the office on time while he was going through this treatment. And by having that understanding, he was actually able to help protect his job. Talking about this, if you're comfortable about it, talk about your mental illness. Check in with other people who struggle. One of the best things I've seen about this is since I've started talking about this stuff, there are actually now several other people in the community who also have started sharing some of their issues with their mental illnesses and their neurodiversities. And every once in a while, one of them will shout me out on Twitter and say, thanks to Cassandra for bringing this conversation open, because now I feel like I can talk about it. And the more you see people do that, especially people who are successful, people who you look up to and admire, the more it normalizes it. And the more it allows us to talk. The other thing is listening. Listening is very hard for those of us in this industry because we're problem solvers, right? And so if somebody comes to us and they're struggling with something, our inclination is to solve the problem, to give them advice. But people aren't always looking for advice, and people aren't always looking for a problem to be solved. So what I've done is, among several of my friends, which thankfully I have amazing friends in my life, we have this thing where kind of somebody will post something in one of our Slack groups or our chats or whatever, and just talk about, oh, I'm having a really hard time with, well, I'll turn to my friend who has the health anxiety. He'll sometimes post in the chat and say, you know, guys, I'm really worried about this. I know I'm okay. I just went to the doctor and got it checked out, but I'm still having a hard time. And one of us will respond, well, do you want advice or do you just want a listening ear? And then you know whether you just need to empathize with the person to be there and support them and tell them it'll be okay, or whether you actually want to help them solve the problem and give them, you know, maybe the evidence to the contrary and that sort of stuff. And so having that kind of convention among your friends, at least a couple trusted people, can be a huge, huge help in having these conversations. And finally, knowing your legal rights. Now, I admittedly don't know what Lithuanian protections are for people with disabilities, but in America, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act. And under that act, you cannot be discriminated against by an employer for having a disability. But the trick is you do have to let your HR people know about that. And once you realize that you're protected for this, it does help reduce some of that concern and some of that worry. Like, I no longer worry about my employer knowing that I have depression because A, there's videos of me talking about this all over the internet, but also because I know then that going in, I have that protection. I have that legal protection, and they cannot fire me because of my depression. So it's important to know your rights in, whatever country or city you are from. And all of these things help us overcome the stigma around illness. The other thing is you need some resources, right? So you have to have the medical, the legal, the support system in your life. But there are also these resources that, especially if you're starting this journey on your own and you want to start looking into things, you'll want these resources. National Alliance on Mental Illness is a nonprofit that raises awareness around mental illnesses, around the prevalence of them, provides resources and tools. A lot of countries have things like mentalhealth.gov or the Mental Health Commission of Canada that are actual government agencies. And some of these websites, actually the one for the US is really good. It has links to support hotlines. It has links for parents supporting their kids. It has all sorts of different stuff. So there's lots of resources out there. And then has anybody heard of the organization Open Sourcing Mental Health? Nope. Really, really cool organization. So it was founded by a guy named Ed Finkler, and Ed is a web developer who started talking about his experiences with mental illness in the tech industry. And he's now formed this nonprofit where if you go on their website, there's forums, there's blogs, there's people you can connect with that are specifically in technology. And so the way that we talk about this is they talk about it in a way that applies or resonates with technologists. The best thing that they have, though, is they have these books, these ebooks that you can download. And some are for employers, some are for employees, some are for team leaders. And they talk about the prevalence of mental illness in tech as well as how to handle that. They also conduct an annual mental health and tech survey, which admittedly is a biased sample. But remember I earlier said 20% of people in the US have mental illnesses. In technology, that's closer to 35 to 38%, which anecdotally does in fact track just from talking to people in the hallways and stuff. That does seem to track. So our industry has a higher prevalence of mental illnesses than a lot of other industries. So if we're taking the time to take care of ourselves and find these resources, what happens? We're more productive. We get more things done. Our morale is better. I am a much happier person when I'm treating my depression. I'm a much more productive, more likable, more motivated person. I get more stuff done, and again, my growth has been increased. And I am thinking, the more I think about it, the more I think the more I've paid attention to my physical and mental health, the more successful I've become. But there's a little bit more to it than that, and you have to follow the treatment that your care providers give you, but you also need to care about some other things. You need to talk about self-care, you need to have fun, you need to have a support system. So self-care is hard to define without using the words self or care, but self-care is really kind actions you do to make your life better. And there are two different types of it. There's kind self-care and reflective self-care. So kind self-care is stuff like, taking a bubble bath is a very stereotypical kind self-care, whereas reflective self-care is stuff like prayer or journaling or things like that. So for me, some of my self-care things, when I go grocery shopping, I'll buy a bunch of flowers at the grocery store. Nothing fancy, just a bunch of colorful flowers, especially when it's a cold, dreary time of year like this. And then every time I walk past my dining room table, I see this bunch of colorful flowers, and it brings me just a little bit of a smile. Actually, my partner, the first day of fall this year, he came home with this bunch of rainbow colored daisies for me. And he said, I know that the first day of fall is a very hard time for you. Maybe these flowers will brighten your day. And it was such a kind little, he knew that this was one of my self-care things, and it was really cool that he did that for me. Journaling, I'm also a big journaler. Sometimes I'm structured, sometimes I'm stream of consciousness. It just kind of depends. But journaling also helps me get stuff out of my brain and onto paper. And I wind up journaling a lot at the end of the night after a conference. I'll dash off a quick journal entry just to get thoughts and ideas and things out onto paper. Or if I'm very worried about something, same thing. A lesson that took me a long time to learn, saying no is a piece of self-care. And I am forever grateful to the manager who told me, Cassandra, you need to learn how to say no. because I feel like I had to say yes to everything, you know, especially when I was trying to grow my presence in the community. I felt like I had to help with everything anybody asked me to help with. And that's a recipe for burnout. So make sure when you're approached with opportunities that you're really evaluating them and deciding whether or not there's something that's going to improve you. And finally, schedule time for yourself on your calendar. I have given this presentation and had people tell me they do things like, I schedule a weekly manicure, or people who might like a new video game's being released that they're excited about and they take the day off of work to play the video game. That is a form of self-care because it allows you to relax and it's okay to do. So make sure that you're valuing yourself in that way. Next up is fun. So adults, especially American adults, can be very uptight and feel like we're not allowed to have fun anymore because we're grown-ups and having fun is for kids. That is bullshit. We should have fun. Life is meant to be enjoyed. And so for me, I prioritize having fun. I prioritize play. And the thing is, when you're having fun and you're playing and you're spending time with your friends, you're actually deepening your relationships, growing your support system, and living the life that, you know, you work so hard, it allows you to enjoy what you've worked for. So for me, I'm a big soccer/football fan and a big board gamer. And I make it a point to do those things with my friends. I go to matches for my local soccer team all summer long. I also have a whole bunch of techie friends who are into the team, and we have a geek tailgate. So a tailgate is we get together in the parking lot before the game, and we have cheeseburgers and drink beer and kick around a soccer ball. And that group of people is my closest friends at home. It's my other community. And same thing around my board game friends. So you spend time doing things you like with people that you like. For me, another kind of way that I have fun is I love to travel. This isn't for everybody. Americans are notorious for not using their vacation time. But for me, I prioritize travel. I prioritize taking time away from work. And even if you're not somebody who likes to travel, take your vacation days anyway and spend that time at home relaxing, doing whatever it is that you like to do so that you're enjoying time and getting rest. And finally, laughing is so important. There are literally probably a dozen or so like TikTokers and websites and stuff I have bookmarked because I know every time I look at them, I'm going to laugh at that. And sometimes when I'm having a really bad day, you know, looking at 2 or 3 funny TikToks or a couple funny memes or something, it doesn't solve everything, but it's a little injection of and a little reminder that life doesn't have to be taken so seriously all of the time. And finally, relationships matter in good times and in bad times. I've been through this firsthand. So in 2018, my life was basically a Bad Country song. Over the course of 6 months, I fractured my rib, my spouse left me, I got rear-ended, my dog died, and I lost my job. Literally everything in my life, everything that my life was around, I lost it. And it was devastating, and it was the worst possible thing. And the only way I could get through that was through my support system. It was through my tailgate friends, through my tech community friends, through the people around me who supported me and helped me get through these really, really hard times and remind me that, yes, life might have been falling apart, but it was still worth living. Well, what else do your relationships do? Goal setting and accountability. When I was training, you know, I used to do short triathlons and stuff, and when I was training for those, I would have friends who would also train, and we'd keep each other accountable on that stuff, keep each other accountable on physical health. Your friends support you in tough times. Like I was saying, life is falling apart. More recently, I had a contract end early at my job at Microsoft, looking for something new, and thankfully, when I put that out there, I've had a lot of people reach out to help support me and get me through this hard time. And then when I find the job, when I complete the thing I'm training for, when life starts to get back together, you have people to celebrate with and to enjoy things with. So when we're talking about health, we're talking about physical and mental health, we need more transparency. We need more empathy, and we need to make it okay to discuss and prioritize caring for our health. It makes it easier for everybody when we do that. And sometimes during these discussions, remember, advice isn't the answer. Sometimes it's just that listening ear, that friendly face, that smile. And ultimately, none of us exists in a bubble. We're all parts of teams, we're all parts of communities, we're all parts of families, we're all parts of friend groups. And our physical and mental health affect all of those things, our families and our friends and our coworkers. So don't be afraid to take care of your health. Don't be afraid to help others do that. please have these conversations because it results in a happier, healthier, and honestly more productive developer community. Thank you for your time. We have a few minutes for questions, so happy to start taking those.
Okay, so if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. I'll pass on the microphone and you can ask. Or you can use this time to get some very valuable advice on how to be healthier in your industry.
And then that's my contact information. I am at Cassandra Faris all over the place. DMs are open. I'm happy to carry this conversation in the hall. That's Katie, Corgi, and Pippin, my two adorable corgis who sometimes are the reason I quite literally get out of bed because the dogs have to go outside. So,
Cassandra, I have a question of my own. Okay, so I'm pretty sure even in this room there are a lot of night owls, right? So people who just can't force themselves to go to sleep. Do you have any pointers and advice to that?
That's where so there's actually a method for doing this, but that's where I talk about, like, you need to know how much sleep you need a night. So for me, I know I need 6 hours of sleep a night. And so if I want to be a night owl, okay, well, if I'm going to go to sleep at 3, can I sleep until 9 or 10 in the morning? Like, I have to make sure about that. There's a book I'm reading as part of another talk I'm building on neurodiversity and attention management called When. It's by an author called Daniel Pink. And the whole book is designed to help you figure out how your brain is wired to be the most productive, when to do certain types of tasks, all of this stuff. But one of the things he suggests is that when you have a few days off work where you don't have to be anywhere, go to sleep whenever you're tired, wake up without setting an alarm, and think about how refreshed you feel, and then that gives you an idea. So that's how I figured out 6 hours of sleep is what I need at night. My Fitbit helped track it. But I was like, oh, if I sleep 6 hours, I feel better. That also kind of makes sense because a REM cycle takes about 90 minutes, so it would make sense that I, wake up better if I'm finished a complete REM cycle. But it's kind of almost trial and error experimenting on yourself, but if you take like 5 or 6 days in a row to do this, that can help you get an idea of how to handle being a night owl, because I'm very much a night owl. I have said that since the beginning of this.
Okay, I also have quite a few comments here from our online viewers. So definitely, I think we can all agree this is an important topic because, as Alfie says, upper management can often try to squeeze out as much output with no regard to your health.
Yes.
So if they don't care, I guess, please, you should care yourselves.
Yeah, that comes down to knowing boundaries and setting boundaries and stating boundaries, and that can be uncomfortable to do. It can be uncomfortable when you tell your manager, no, I'm not going to work until midnight. And you might have a day here and there. I worked at a startup for a while, and there was a day here or there where we'd have to be like basically around the clock because of a security breach or something like that. But when that becomes consistent, that's when it's a problem. So yeah, don't be afraid to state your boundaries, push back at your managers. And if you're on a team that's not supportive of that, it could be a sign that you should start looking for something else.
Once again, Cassandra with her brilliant advices. All right, we're gonna have a short break to get some windows open and get some air in here. Be back in approximately 15 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, it's very warm in here.